Okay, great. So we're now on to item 7, which is the Audit Services Annual Risk Assessment. Larry?
Yes, thank you. Our standards require that we put together an audit plan annually and present it for the committee, and that audit plan is to be based on risk to the organization. And so we perform a couple of risk assessments each year, and specifically for employer audits and then also for internal audits. And in this item, we have a couple of illustrations that demonstrate the processes that we use specifically on ARM 334 and 339 for an internal approach there. And first we do an assessment for our employer program, and that includes, this year we did something new. As we discussed previously, we did a risk assessment for charter schools and charter schools only and all other employers. And so in the past, our charter schools, recognizing that they're unique and different structure, when they were in the total population, only one ever rose to a high level. And so we wanted to look at them individually, and we developed separate risk factors that are outlined on 335 here for that particular process. And so we're able to risk rank all of our employers and our charter schools. And so the results of that are on ARM 336, and based on our available resources and how we're going to prioritize those, we're recommending that we perform this next year 50 full scope audits. And then based on the charter school results, we'll also include 5 charter school audits. And then, as I previously mentioned, on ARM 338, the limited scope audits that utilize the data analytics that we'll focus in, and we'll actually perform 20 of those limited scope audits. And that will be our in our proposed audit plan for 2018, which is actually the next agenda item. For internal audits, starting on page 339, our process considers not only risk to the organization that we're currently facing, but also those that are strategic types of risks. And so we consider the strategic plan, our business plan, which is kind of a go-forward view, if you will. And then we assess those risks. The results of that is what Dr. Yetman was talking about on page 340. Based on our criteria, we determine the level of risk in each of the business processes that we assess, and also recommend then those that we would include as an audit. So those that have kind of a circle are proposed for our internal audit plan. They're also highlighted under the top auditable areas. Some of those you may note that we've audited that are in the high risk category. We've audited within the last 3 years, and then a couple of them we have audits currently in progress as well. And then there's a couple that we suggest that we might wait for a future potential audit. So for example, our enterprise compliance program would be something that we'd want to look at in the future as it continues to mature. But yet, as we discussed, knowing that our enterprise compliance program has been in place for a few years, we have item number 3 there, where we're recommending, let's take a look at that and do an assessment now and see if we can compare it to frameworks and if we can continue to help mature the program. There's also a couple of other elements with regards to internal audits that we look at in addition to the business processes, is kind of the underlying support area. And so in our information technology area, in our information security area, separate risk assessments are performed in those areas. And with regards to investment, traditionally we've gone on a cycle of our asset classes. And so what we've done is we've tried to work with the investments, and we've enhanced that to include what they would call programs or strategies as well. And so you'll see things such as the securities lending program or the currency management program that are also included in the investment mix. And so we have on ARM 341 proposed investment audits that we would perform, as well as information technology audits, including information security. On ARM 342, based on those proposed audits, we try to demonstrate how audit services assist in the achievement of the overall goals and objectives of the organization. And when we evaluate the controls underlying this, it makes sure that, that while we're all about performance here, and it makes sure that we're performing, within our appropriate control framework, in compliance, and that we're addressing risks. And so this is designed to kind of show how we support achievement of those goals and objectives. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions? My question has to do with that heat map that Bob said he thinks is great, which I agree is great. But a couple of questions. First of all, how does this compare to our enterprise risk management heat map?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think we mentioned in the body of the report here that in the past we kind of relied upon that enterprise risk management report, and recognizing that those are kind of the top risks to the organization from an enterprise perspective. But what it doesn't necessarily consider is some of the business area risks that they might be dealing with that perhaps could bubble up to an enterprise issue. And our risk assessment went a little bit deeper. And so you'll see that there is some overlapping areas in here, such as information security, which is right at the top of our enterprise risk list. Also, pension solution is right up there. Space planning, data governance associated with pension solution. And so there is it's very congruent, right? And you wouldn't expect it to be disparate, right? You'd want to see because that they're in line. And so we did kind of look at kind of a gap assessment between the two. But our risk assessment here takes it down just a little bit further into the operations of the organization, where we start looking at more specific areas such as the legislative process and communications and the IRC 415 replacement benefit program. And so we're looking a little deeper into the organization. I think what we'll see going forward is as the risk management program continues to mature, and they're starting to do that now, looking at the risks in each of the operational areas, not just the overarching enterprise risks, we'll see even greater alignment. And so we will always be looking for that going forward. And so I hope that answers your question. But what we didn't notice is some large enterprise issue that was identified here that was not included in our current report to the committee and to the board.
My other question then is I see that you've got high, medium, and low, and we've got 3 issues that are auditable areas that are in high that we're not auditing. Number 3, enterprise compliance, 6, space planning, and 9, data governance. And then we have one that we're auditing this year that's in low, and that's 42, the Global Reporting Initiative Sustainability. So can you explain in particular why we're not auditing those 3 that are in the high risk area?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great observation. So the enterprise compliance, which we feel is significant and important to the organization, it's included in our enterprise risk report as well. It's brand new,
okay,
right? It's a new program. We want to give it an opportunity, just like we're doing with enterprise risk, to mature and implement their processes. And so we will, what we're recommending here is we recognize it as a risk. We're suggesting that it be a potential audit for the future,
okay,
based on future risk assessments. And the same, with space planning, we know that there's a lot going on there. There isn't a lot of auditable areas at this point. We recognize what management is doing with regards to space planning efforts. And then under data governance, we see also we know that there's a tremendous amount of effort in the last couple of years over data governance and a new policy that has just come out. So as we're implementing the pension solution and more fully implementing that new policy, once that's implemented, then we're suggesting that for a future audit.
okay,
So,
great. That makes
So we,
makes
so we,
sense. Makes
okay,
sense.
and now the one that you point out here on the global reporting issue, it's interesting that that jumps from item number 28 to 42. So that gives you an idea of how comprehensive our inventory is that we were really looking at. This item right here is not a high risk to the organization. It is an important initiative that we generate this sustainability report. I think it shows our leadership in that area, and I think CalPERS is doing the right thing there. As part of those reporting standards, it does require an audit of the numbers that's used.
Yeah, you gotta stop that CalPERS.
Yeah, he did. I was gonna let him go. Did you hear you cut?
I just thought I
Did you
heard.
hear yourself?
My hearing.
That's my greatest fear. It's been realized. Sorry, apologize. Okay, so from now on, we're just stirs.
Good part of that story? You survived your greatest fear.
Yeah.
Show all of us.
There you go. Amen.
Okay, took courage. Okay. So it's a requirement that we audit that area. And so rather than contracting with an external firm to come in and do that, which is an expensive initiative and approach, we're able to accomplish it with just a few hundred hours because we understand the processes that are being used and how the information is being gathered and things like that. The learning curve is huge. And so we're able to accomplish it efficiently, and it's just an added thing that we do. And it's,
Okay,
and
and
it's
so-
not a significant amount of time.
And the three that are in the high risk area, are, as you explained, are not really ready to be audited. So it's not like we're taking resources away from something that is really important to audit this year.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, well, then, this is not an action item. We now move on then to the internal audit plan for 2018, item number 8, which will be an action item.
So based on our risk assessment, we put together our plan, and this is now a calendar year plan. In the past, we used to have a fiscal year plan, and it's based on that risk assessment that we did. I think the easiest way to look at this is maybe just turn to ARM 347, and it has kind of highlights, if you will, of what is included in here. So we basically have 13 internal audits. As we discussed earlier, there's a large focus on internal controls over member data. There's other areas that we identified that we will include. Under our contracted audits, we will continue facilitating these. We had several presenters today. Our role is to help design the scope of those, work with the program area in designing the scope, and we facilitate those audits and make sure that they're done appropriately. And so we have several listed. Again, for the investment area, we'll focus on performance reporting, currency management, inflation sensitive, and the securities lending area. And then under the fiscal area is actually our pension program allocation. And then today we had a report on policy compliance. And then the next step that we were doing in the audit approach to compliance within the investment office was looking at the trading system specifically and the compliance attributes that are built into that system for consistency with policy. All right, so now we've looked at the policy. We'll make sure that the controls are automated there. And then we have a couple of technology areas. There's still emphasis in here on pension solution, looking at the implementation of that system as well. There's also emphasis on information security, right, which are a couple of areas I think that are important. And so just from a high level, we're focusing on, you know, what I think are the key areas in the organization that we need to be focusing on.
Any questions? Okay. Well, this is an action item, so we need to approve the audit plan.
I know, Tiffany.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any objection? Okay, great. Well, we've adopted it. Thank you very much, Larry. Great work on this. So now we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about compliance. So Dina. There's Dina. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, Dina. So I'm excited to introduce to you Dina Mount. She is the director of our Enterprise Compliance Oversight Program. Dina brings to us almost 30 years of experience in creating, developing, and implementing compliance programs, both at the state and at the county level. Obviously, she started in grade school. She has, today is their third month here. And as she's about to demonstrate, she has been working very, very diligently in preparing and sort of developing her vision for the compliance program. So, Dina, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Brian. So good morning.
Good morning.
I appreciate this opportunity to provide the committee with an overview of the Enterprise Compliance Oversight Program. My objective for this presentation is to address the committee's previous questions. 1, what are we complying with? And 2, what are the compliance program's scope and framework? Fundamentally, we're complying with the law. And laws are typically operationalized as policies, procedures, and standards. The complex legal and regulatory environment here at CalSTRS necessitates a thorough review and analysis of all written oversight policies and procedures to ensure topicality and compliance with applicable laws. Every business area within CalSTRS performs a very specific task, which contributes to the overall success of the organization. And just as each business area's operations are unique, compliance for each business area is unique as well. Compliance in investments looks very different from compliance in technology services or that in benefits and services. The scope of the Enterprise Compliance Program will be to identify, catalog, and update as needed all oversight requirements specific to each business area. Then work closely with each business area to remedy any non-compliance issues. In a sense, compliance in this realm is a preventative function, kind of a fix it before audit finds it concept. We'll work closely within each business area to customize a specific compliance function needed within that business area. And the idea is to provide a dashboard of any identified non-compliance issues and progress toward any remediation by business area and for CalSTRS as a whole to the ARM Committee and executive management as needed. So either at these meetings or more frequently if big issues arise. We are also complying with CalSTRS 2016-19 strategic plan goals to drive operational excellence. Enterprise compliance is one of the 4 stated goals. Compliance contributes to operational excellence by ensuring a healthy culture of ethics, integrity, and accountability, where any operational weakness is identified, acknowledged, remedied, and used as a learning opportunity going forward. The scope and framework of the program are designed to provide assurance to the ARM Committee and executive management that all business operations are properly designed to follow the law, are operating as intended, and of equal importance, are operating ethically and with integrity. Contrary to some of my Office of General Counsel colleagues' beliefs, I'll assert here that legal is not always ethical, and ethical is not always legal.
You want to explain that quickly?
No. Another key function of enterprise compliance is ensuring a culture where the practice of following the rules because we should, and not just because the rule exists, is embedded in everyday operations and business decisions for CalSTRS. The Enterprise Compliance Program current activities include the formation of a compliance advisory group. This is made up of subject matter experts from all the business areas, which will help facilitate customizing compliant functions specific to those business area needs. Some business areas already have more robust compliance components in effect than others. And the subject matter experts will provide a reciprocal relationship between the business area and the enterprise compliance program, and will share the compliance concept with their business area, as well as bring back information and needs of that business area that we can work on for compliance needs. We've begun development of a matrix for all the laws, policies, procedures, and standards pertaining to CalSTRS operations. The compliance program will be a gatekeeper for managing, updating, and modifying as needed all of the policies, procedures, and standards that pertain to CalSTRS operations. We've also completed a code of ethics and business conduct document, and this has been vetted through executive management and is on the agenda for the committee's approval. I believe the idea is that you will approve it to move forward to the board, is my thought. We've also been working on a 4-year implementation plan. It outlines specific activities, developmental steps for fully integrating compliance and ethics into daily activities, and includes metrics or milestones for each year of program development. For year 1, the activity focus will be collaboration with all business areas through the development of the Compliance Advisory Group, as I mentioned. Review and analysis of existing operational compliance functions and identifying any gaps or overlaps. And determining specific business area compliance needs and working with those business areas to achieve their compliance goals. I'm projecting that all of the 1-year activities and metrics can be achieved with existing resources, which is me. Activities and metrics built into the 4-year plan will be reevaluated after year 1 to identify possible additional resource needs. Specific activities in the framework are best illustrated in a brief PowerPoint presentation that I'll share with you now. So on the first slide, the United States Federal Sentencing Guidelines state that to have an effective compliance and ethics program, an organization shall exercise due diligence to prevent and detect criminal conduct and otherwise promote an organizational culture that encourages ethical conduct and a commitment to compliance with the law. Thank you. The framework design uses 8 pillars or core functions to support program objectives. At the foundation of the enterprise compliance program is the culture of integrity. This is to emphasize that compliance is not just about doing things right, like following rules and laws. It's also about doing the right thing by ensuring and supporting ethical decisions in all business operations. While each pillar emphasizes unique compliance activities, all work simultaneously to support overall program objectives. The implementation plan provides details, so I won't go into those details here. I'll just give a brief summary of what each pillar or function summarizes or entails. The program structure, design, and oversight function will focus efforts on gaining understanding of the applicable governing laws and regulations, cataloging these existing laws and policies and procedures and standards, initiating a compliance advisory group to maximize subject matter expertise with limited resources, and establish compliance objectives specific to each business area. The legal and compliance risk management function will collaborate, we will collaborate with audits and risk management efforts to identify business areas in greatest need of risk mitigation and assist with audit finding remediation. Again, this will be to go in and work in conjunction with audits with their audit plan to see where they intend to audit in that upcoming year and help that business area check their compliance and help them work towards compliance before there's an audit finding. The next column, policies, standards, and procedures. This effort will roll out the Code of Ethics and Business Conduct document once approved by the board, analyze existing policies and procedures to ensure they comply with existing law, identify policy and procedure gaps that may exist, and offer advisory support to business areas to amend existing policies or update as needed. For training, we'll develop a risk-based compliance and ethics curriculum that will include the Code of Ethics and Business Conduct requirements and partner with the CalSTRS training unit to identify specific needs on the training calendar for new staff and ongoing staff, and ensure that all staff, management, and board members receive appropriate compliance training. For communications, we'll create a communication strategy that aligns with the training calendar and partner with the CalSTRS technology services to prepare and disseminate relevant compliant messages. For allegation reporting and investigations, we'll analyze existing hotline and reporting functions for system improvement opportunities, including possible use of a third-party vendor, which is in fact an industry standard best practice, and develop and disseminate a speak-up policy for reporting non-ethical or non-compliant activities. We'll also assess the current allegation and investigation processes. For discipline and incentives, we'll ensure adequate guidelines exist for consequences of noncompliance, and we'll develop or support disciplinary and incentive functions. For example, we'll create a category possibly within Virtuosity that's specific to ethics and compliance and give kudos to folks who speak up. And finally, the program management and monitoring function. We'll translate regulatory standards into testable controls, procedures, and key performance indicators for each of the business areas. We'll create monitoring protocols and procedures and develop a reporting function to ensure that the executive management and the ARM committee receive status updates on any non-compliance issues, both from a business area perspective and as an enterprise perspective for CalSTRS. So I'll end with this quote by Douglas Reeves. Sustainable change, after all, depends not upon compliance with external mandates or blind adherence to regulations, but rather upon the pursuit of the greater good. This quote embodies the goal of the Enterprise Compliance Program, to embed ethics and integrity into everyday functions at CalSTRS, to create a culture where we don't just strive to comply for compliance sake. After all, legal is not always ethical, and ethical is not always legal. But doing the right thing is always the right thing to do. Thank you. And I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. And it's great to see the progress being made here on the development or the improvement of our compliance efforts. Let's see, we have a question. Dana.
So Dina, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
You've chewed off a yeoman's task there, I think, and you're right, I think it is just you. So if it becomes overwhelming and you need help, don't be afraid to ask for it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I do appreciate that.
Anybody else? Joy.
Dina, welcome. It's been nice getting to know you a little bit as you've come on board, and excited about the structure that you're bringing to this and some of your vision for how we're going to how we implement. I guess I have a couple of questions. We just spent a lot of time in this committee talking about both the audits that have been done by our external auditors as well as done by our internal team. And I wonder if you could help us or help me understand, how do we draw, or do we draw a line between the compliance oversight that we do of our compliance with laws and regulations, for which there are many, that different functions in CalSTRS need to comply with. And I know, we have policies and procedures that are intended to ensure that we comply with those laws and regulations. But then I think that there are some other elements that are also continuously under review that may not be directly related to laws and regulations, but have to do with how we operate, how we operate as an organization. And so how do you kind of help us distinguish between the two?
Okay, good question. I've been asked that a lot over my career, the difference between what is compliance versus what is audits or the existing functions. And for the generally accepted model is the risk management model that gives the 3 lines of authority, with line number 2 being compliance and line number 3 being audits. So it distinguishes very distinct functions, but sometimes organizationally those functions blur. And usually the compliance program is very customized for the business need. And I'm going to use an analogy, so forgive me if I insult anyone with my lack of medical knowledge, but I envision compliance as your primary care physician. So you get regular checkups. You may not feel sick, you may feel fine, but it's kind of best practice to go see your doctor once a year and just get a checkup. And so your eyes are fine, your ears are fine, your heart's fine, but your primary care physician may notice you have high blood pressure. So they'll prescribe to you high blood pressure medicine and diet and exercise and a way to get your high blood pressure managed. And you may or may not take that advice and go about your merry way. But if you don't take the advice, or if you are not aware of the high blood pressure in the first place, you will probably end up eventually in the emergency room, which is audits. Sorry, Larry. And that's where they do a diagnosis. They find out, why are you here? What brought you here? What problems led you being here? What rules or regulations or prescription didn't you follow? And help identify at a basic level what to do to have that not happen again. And so to me, that's the distinction, is one of them is more of a preventative, kind of a deep dive into seeing what's there, what needs to be fixed, how can we fix it to ensure that when internal or external auditors come in and look at our functions, we have mitigated any risk as well as possible. Again, it's up to each business area manager to take the advice or to get the flu shot. But from an enterprise perspective, it's a look holistically. There's a lot of focus in CalSTRS at investments and audits and the different committees that focus specifically on functions. But there's a lot of other business areas within CalSTRS that don't have specific areas looking at them. And in order to ensure enterprise compliance, it's looking at every single one of the business areas and making sure that they're all following the rules, guidelines, policies. And if policies and procedures are weak or outdated, we help update those and make them current and make them relevant.
So I've got a follow-up question, but I think maybe Dr.
It's probably maybe the same question, but go ahead.
I guess I'm still, so maybe I'll come up with an example, and I don't know that this is a good one, but I was trying to think of a policy that we may have that the board has approved. So we've got board policies on investment delegation, sort of up to what dollar amount can investment officers, directors, the CIO, make decisions on. I don't think that is a policy that is a specific legal or regulatory requirement. It's a board policy in terms of how we manage our fund. Where does that fall?
Great question. And again, there'll be a matrix of all the laws, policies, procedures, and standards that apply to every business area within CalSTRS. And where law does apply and where policy and procedure can be translated from law, that certainly is the highest level of authority. But there could very well be policies or procedures, sometimes backdoor procedures that get implemented because the policy hasn't been updated or isn't current. So people kind of do workarounds or do things that make their job easier or more efficient, but may not follow the policy. So does that mean that they're committing fraud, or does that mean that maybe the policy needs to be looked at, updated, made more current, or made more topical to any law that could pertain, or to decisions that the board has made that at one time it could have been relevant, but maybe over time, when a procedure changed, the policy didn't necessarily change with it. And so as the gatekeeper for that entire matrix, we'll be able to manage that. Did that answer your question?
Bob?
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
So my question is maybe the same as Ms. Hager's, but maybe different. And I'm just not smart enough to get to understand your answer. And there's a distinct possibility with that that's true. But so when I think of the scope of what compliance could cover, so for example, Ms. Hager gave an example of, well, there are laws, right? And we need to comply with those laws. And one can imagine an enterprise compliance system whose goal it is to limit itself to laws. And then there can be a broader scope to an enterprise compliance system as the second line of defense, right? In your example, the first line would be the patient themselves, whose responsibility is to go exercise, right? And then the second is, and then the third, right? Or one can imagine a broader definition of what set of systems and controls a compliance system will overlook. For example, what you referred to is an internally adopted policy that, although not legally mandated by state or federal law, seemed a best practice internally. And will the compliance system have that under its purview as well? And so I just want to gain an understanding. I don't have an answer here, but I just want to gain an understanding of how broad the compliance system sees itself moving within the organization. Is it going to be limited to simply legal issues, clear issues that are legal, or those that seem almost legal? Or is it going to migrate into areas that are not legal at all, but rather just policy-oriented?
Thank you.
And, right, we did have the same question, right?
We did.
Okay, so I apologize if I wasn't clear in my response. My vision is that it will encompass all of not only legal requirements, but there are many, but also policy and procedures that the organization currently follows or should be following or is following to some degree. So it will look at, from an enterprise perspective, all of the regulatory or oversight requirements. So there may not be a law. The policy may have just been developed by the management or by the board or by the committee. And so each one of the existing laws, policies, procedures, and standards that exist right now for CalSTRS will be looked at and analyzed to determine whether or not it needs updating, it needs to be brought back to the committee for any kind of action, whether it had been, if the law does supersede all other actions, if it was interpreted correctly. So it's really encompasses all of the oversight authority that CalSTRS is under or is following, and it looks at all of those. Yes, Brian.
I'm sorry to
Thank you.
interrupt you.
Please.
I know from talking to you that one of the, and perhaps one of the things that would expand upon your answer is your view of looking at internal controls related to existing policies, and where you see the role of enterprise compliance on that.
Thank you. Okay. So yes, there are existing internal controls, which are the policies and procedures. And I know that Audits looks very closely at internal controls. And where the enterprise compliance program doesn't necessarily establish or develop the internal controls, we look at them from a objective perspective to see if they lend themselves to doing the right thing within that business area. So, am I hitting? What? Yeah. I still see question, so I'm maybe not answering your question, and I apologize.
More comment, and So thank you. Thank you for, kind of sharing, just so that I understand, or we understand what your vision is, which helps inform the materials that you circulated to the board in terms of kind of the phased four-year program and some of the discussion around resources, et cetera. I guess I'll just share that from my perspective, the piece that I think may be really important to focus on is the kind of first level that Dr. Yetman talked about, which is, compliance with specific laws and regulations that CalSTRS must comply with. And I guess I wonder if thinking about this program, not just as phased over time, but also phased in terms of scope, will potentially help us, get a program, maybe a narrower program than what you're envisioning long-term, but a narrow program up and running more quickly to start instead of, kind of a much broader program that's going to take 4 years. Let's narrow and hone in on, what may be the most critical to focus on initially, and then accelerate that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on a couple of things that we've just been talking about. First of all, so I think you just said that you wouldn't be designing the internal controls, but you would be sort of assessing the internal controls. So what happens if you identify that the internal controls aren't adequate? What's the next step?
That's where the enterprise compliance program would step in an advisory capacity and assist, because the business area knows best how they operate. I would be working within each business area and through the subject matter experts to help design, help create, help provide advisory input on policy or procedure that helps govern or helps run their day-to-day operations. So I would not have the authority to go in and just write the policy. But because they know what they need and they know what works best for them, as long as we're looking at it from a compliance perspective, and if there's a law that tells them how they have to do it, then I'll guide them in that direction. If it's creating a policy where none exists, it's reaching out and looking at best practices and trying to determine from an operational perspective, how will they achieve their goal by creating policies or procedures or updating standards that may or may not exist or be outdated. So although I wouldn't have the authority to create it, I would certainly advise on how they should create it themselves.
But you see so your first step is to assess the internal controls, but then you see it as your responsibility to help ensure that those internal controls are improved if there's a deficiency.
Correct.
Okay, good. Along the lines of both Dana saying, gee, it's just you, tell us if you need more resources, and Joy talking about, maybe we should bite off a chunk that we can chew. That was sort of my reaction to the 4-year plan. It was a great 4-year plan, but I have two concerns about it. One is that I want to make sure that there's usefulness soon, rather than waiting 4 years for there to be a full-blown compliance program that suddenly is useful to us. And second of all, because the plan after year 1 does require more resources than just you, I want to understand sort of within the organization whether we can do something now to commit to you that we're going to grow the program, and that may be something that we deal with in tomorrow's budget discussion, or if not, that we see a plan from you that sort of says, okay, if we don't get support, if it's just me for the next 4 years, what do we do? Because I think organizations can make the mistake of putting in place a very extensive plan, which starts to look more like a wish list than a plan if we don't know that we've got the resources to carry it out.
Agreed, thank you.
Okay, so, I don't know if if it's appropriate to talk about it tomorrow in the budget discussion, or how do we?
Well, I think,
address that
I think
issue?
we have interim resource abilities to supplement programs, and we do that all the time in the organization between budget cycles. I mean, it'd be, I think, probably the best sequence to that would be to continue on to find out what year one needs in terms of that resource, determine if there are some we can move into it, or allocate a new position by reallocating a position within the organization, and then hitting the budget cycle in a more normal fashion next year. But I mean, I don't think there's meant to be any handcuff at all on the program, even now. I mean, we want to be responsive to the scope as we define it. I just want to make sure we all get a common agreement on what that year one scope is, and then and resource it. But I think that would be the best sequence to it, rather than jam something into the state's budget on the spot.
So, Dina, then you're comfortable, though, that the work that you're planning to do in year one will lay the groundwork for further improvements in the program, even if you don't get funding, additional
Absolutely.
funding for year two?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes. The 4-year plan is sustainable with a program of one, with a design that the compliance advisory group is established, and I'm using resources that already exist to at least stay connected to the business areas. Without the advisory group, it would be difficult for just myself to get up to speed from a knowledge perspective on all the business areas. So this gives me at least that link. And again, we won't really know how it will look until we make progress in the program. It is brand new. It's hard to gauge it against anything existing. And that's why year 2 of the plan includes an evaluation of what, do we need more resources? Maybe we don't. It's hard to tell at this point. So, yeah.
Dana?
So Dina, you've, going back to what you've outlined for us in that 4 years and taking into consideration Joy and Paul's remarks, have we given you what you need to, so you know what the committee is expecting of you? I mean, have we given you sufficient feedback? I mean, because for me, it sounds like we're changing her plan to be at a higher level so she can accomplish more. Or there's been comments to that. I just want to make sure that if that's what the committee is expecting of Dina, Dina understands that and changes her work plan accordingly. Because it doesn't follow what she's presented to us.
Bob, it looks like Bob has something to add on that.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Dillon, because the answer is no, or at least not to me. If I were sitting there, and I'm not, I'm just sitting here. But it's, if I were her, if I were she, if I were Ms. Mount, it would be a little unclear right now to me exactly how I'm supposed to move forward. And I think, and so I was trying to get a good handle on this, and I think I have it now. It sounds like Ms. Mount's vision is a more, what I would call a more comprehensive or enterprise system that looks at compliance more broadly with respect not to just rules and regulations, but policies and procedures. This is not uncommon, but it's also not uncommon to limit the scope within organizations. You see all sorts of things. There's no one size fits all here. And nor do you have to do everything at once. You can start with one scope, and you can expand that scope as resources grow, experience grows with the system. So I don't know that I have any strong recommendations because I haven't thought a lot about it. I'll do that, but what I want is to make sure that Ms. Mount knows what you want, and so I think the committee should think about what Ms. Higa, Mr. Rosensteel, Ms. Ortega, who's on the committee? I forgot. What do you think a reasonable scope is? And if you haven't decided yet, if you're still fulminating over what you think a reasonable scope is, should it just be legal issues? Or if it is, should it just be legal issues to start with? And then let it grow after that? I think a decision needs to be, I modestly suggest a decision needs to be made in terms of where do you want it to go? How do you want it to start? I think you need to make a choice, or if you can't make a choice, then say, well, we're not sure yet, right? But we need to ruminate over this a little bit more. But Ms. Mount has proposed something, and she's ready to run with it. I've just met her, but she seems obviously a person of great talent and great enthusiasm. When you combine those two, people tend to take off. And that's wonderful, right? But you gotta be careful, because, she is a precious resource of one at this point. And you don't want her taken off on something where later, in a few months, you're gonna say, hold on, that's not what we had in mind. So I just wanna make sure that the board, right, I work for you, and I wanna make sure you're comfortable with where the compliance program's gonna roll out, because I'm not sure I've heard clear guidance. Thank you.
Maybe we'll get some from Joy.
Just an opinion. I mean, I guess so I have two comments. I mean, I do think that it may be wise to focus on the legal and regulatory component of it, at least to start, and then consider, down the road whether there is an expansion that we want to pursue. But I say but because we've talked, I think, Dina, before you joined the organization, Brian, we've had some conversations about the kind of the inventory or the assessment that we would be doing of what's in the universe of those legal and regulatory issues. So it's a little bit hard for me to say, because I believe that if you do legal, regulatory, plus all policies and procedures, the latter is clearly larger than the former. But I'm not sure that I could say what the difference is. So it's a little bit hard, but I guess my recommendation is to be more focused on the legal and regulatory to start. And I don't know, Paul, how you want to handle it or
Well, see
get
if
feedback.
anybody else committee members have thoughts.
Thank you. I appreciate that input. I do. I just want, I apologize.
Let me offer then my thoughts on that, and then we can see. I agree with Joy, especially I think since we're unclear yet about future resources, which was the sort of the thrust of my questions was I want to make sure that we've got something useful soon, and it seems to me that focusing on legal, even though the policies and procedures would be great to have, and I'd love to see the compliance program grow to that. I also thought actually that most of what you were saying, because you started out by saying, trying to answer the committee's question as to what we're trying to comply with. We're trying to comply with the laws. I mean, I think you were pretty clear, at least in the written presentation, that that's the focus. And I think that should be the initial focus until we see the program develop a little bit more. We see whether it's working with respect to that piece, and we get more resources to expand it. But that would be my feeling. But now we've got a couple of people in line, so.
If I could just respond to that before I forget.
Okay, then.
My brain is full. So in response to that, I agree that would be the starting point. The law is obviously the highest authority, and we definitely want to be compliant with the law. So that would be the first and foremost step. Unfortunately, an enterprise program looks at all business areas, and not all business areas within CalSTRS are governed by a law. So in order for us to be enterprise compliant, some of the business areas would require stepping down into policy, procedure, and standard. So I just wanted to share that.
Lynn?
Thank you, Paul. That was my question, actually. If it does, the intent is to make it enterprise-wide, is there a way to focus on maybe the legal aspects first and looking at those areas that are not governed by laws, maybe putting more emphasis on their policies? I don't know if you can work that way or not.
So yeah, one concept I kind of threw around in creating the matrix of all the laws and policies and procedures, or in the developmental stage of that process, and realizing that not all of the business areas had a law that governed, is categorizing the ones that, where the law does apply and making that the highest priority, and then those where there is no law that governs, making policy and procedure that has the highest material negative consequence if not complied with is the focus, so that there's at least one compliance function for each business area, whether it be a law, whether it be a procedure, whether it be a standard, but pick one for each to at least have a starting point.
And if you modify your plan this way, then does it mean you have to rewrite your entire four-year plan, or? Okay.
No, it's a proposal, it's flexible, and I'm flexible.
Thank you.
So I think you've defined what you think it should be.
Yes.
Which is, I think, consistent with what you presented to us. Harry, but we got people dropping in and out of the queue.
It's not the first time I've dropped in and out, Paul.
Good, thank you.
Hopefully it's not the last.
I was
Hopefully it's not
hoping you
the
would drop
last.
back in.
I kind of like that, the ability to drop in and out. I'm of the mind, Ms. Mount is new. She's taking on a big project for us. I like her suggested approach as to what she thinks she can do that's going to be most successful. And I think we should have check-in points with her as to the progress that she's making, prioritizing what she thinks is doable, and that, we can crawl before we walk before we jog before we run before we sprint. And, my philosophy and approach is if you have someone that's talented, that's enthusiastic, you unleash them and let them do their job and work and they can help us along the way. I think if we're trying to do too much too soon, what my experience is with talented people with enthusiasm, without clear direction, they get discouraged quickly. So I would rather embrace what Ms. Mount is proposing to us, have some check-in periods as to the progress that she's making, and we can expand upon what we're trying to accomplish. I'm going to check out again.
So, okay, good. Well, feel free to check back in. So I think if I could summarize, and I agree with Harry, and maybe I can try to summarize so we all have it out there what you are going to do. It's pretty much what you stated, which is during the first year, it's going to be you and drawing on resources as you can, with a primary focus on the legal issues, but making sure that you have some compliance activity in each of the business areas. And if those business areas are really not guided so much by the law, but instead by internal rules and regulations and policies, then you're going to work on those, and you will be developing the program in such a way that it can continue to make progress after the first year, whether it's just you or whether it's more than you, and we'll have check-ins maybe every other meeting of the ARM committee. You'll give us an update. Is that a reasonable summary of, I think, where we've come to here?
Absolutely.
Does that give you adequate direction?
It does. Thank you.
Bob, does that make sense to you? Or if your questions, so you're not uncertain or as uncertain anymore? Okay, good.
Not as uncertain.
As uncertain. Okay. Brian? Sound good?
Yes.
Okay, great. I don't know if this is an action item, or I think it not, but I think this is good direction if you tell. Great, well, thank you, wonderful presentation, and very happy to see the progress we're making here. Yeah, don't go away, because the next issue is item, yes, let's see, number 10, the Code of Ethics and Business Conduct.
So if I may, you'll see this as an action item. This is due to our enthusiasm and sort of desire to move quickly. So I do apologize. We could have put it as an information item, gotten your input, and then either had to, if you chose to, take action on it, and then, or bring it back. And so we can still do the same thing. It's just the X is in the wrong place. So This is a first read for the committee, and then, as Dina mentioned, once it moves forward out of the ARM committee, we would take it to the regular board for their adoption and approval. Go ahead, Dina. That was procedural.
So thank you. So the Code of Ethics and Business Conduct document supports ethical and legal focus of the Enterprise Compliance Oversight Program and ensures that all staff, management, contractors, and business partners understand the importance of doing the right thing. The code document incorporates existing policy documents from several business areas, behavior standards and expectations, pledges, and agreements into a single source. This allows for ease of reference, consistent training, compliance verification, and streamlined updates as needed. Upon approval by the ARM committee, as Brian mentioned, we'll move it forward in the normal course of business. That's all I have.
Bob, were you,
Oh, I just wanted
No.
a cue.
oh, okay.
That's your cue, sir.
Does anybody have any comments on this? Sounds like nobody has any questions about this. If that's the case, then can we move this forward? Would somebody like to?
I'll move adoption.
Okay,
A second.
okay.
Adoption and.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll move adoption. I just want to, I thought this was a pretty powerful sentence. It's in Jack's letter. We have a solemn responsibility to continue this tradition. I think that's a pretty powerful sentence, a solemn responsibility of this tradition. It's very well said. So I'll move the recommendation of
And then
adoption
we have
at
a
this
second,
point.
so, any discussion? Great. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Great, wonderful, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Move that one quickly.
Thank you.
So number 11, Larry, back up with a chief auditor update.
Thank you. I just have two brief items. First of all, according to our internal audit charter and the ARM committee charter, when we make any modifications to the audit plan, it's my responsibility to bring it forward and inform you of that. And so we had a request here recently for an independent review of some information security items related to web-based applications that are used by our members and that are folks access over the internet, such as the My CalSTRS and the Secure Employer website, and also looking at the CalSTRS network. And it's quite an extensive review that will carry into 2018. We have hours allocated for that in our 2018 plan, as I indicated, but I just want to inform the committee that we've started working on that now, and we're developing scope of work and looking at bringing the vendor on board and things like that. So that's kind of a slight modification to our plan. Doesn't require additional staff resources. Management is working on that with the Information Security Office. Okay. Second thing is, boy, we sure covered a lot of material today, and there was a lot of information here. And, you know, while we tried to provide some graphics that made it a little bit more consumable, I'd like to you know, suggest going forward and point out a couple of things if you hadn't noticed here. One is the implementation of the severity ratings, which I think is, you'll find that very helpful for the committee. Two is on the external audit reports. We've also had them include executive summaries now. In the past, they never really included that, as well as severity ratings and classification of findings for you to understand what is important in those reports. And in the past, this forum has been used to always transmit that information and provide the committee and the public those reports. And so what I would like to suggest that we consider going forward is that, like we do with internal audits on these external reviews, is that we provide you with the executive summary and any items that are significant or that require management, or excuse me, that would require attention by the committee, that we include that in the report and we bring it to your attention. That the full report, however, would be posted on some sort of, like a website or that's accessible for board members, and you're notified when they're posted there, and when you have an opportunity or you want to go out and take a look at the full report, that you're able to do so. It might save a tree or two, and I think it'd be a more efficient process, and it will help you focus on the areas that are just really important and not have to filter through so much information here. So if that's acceptable to the committee, we'll try to move that forward for our next presentation and then see how that works.
I'll just say that because I read everything on my iPad, everything that's posted that I want to read, then I have to separately download that and put it on my iPad in the right place. So I personally, I mean, it doesn't work for me. It may work for others. And then if there's a lot of, physical books, maybe it saves a tree or two, but that's just my own personal opinion.
I'll be happy to provide you a link. And then, as part of our, like we do in our reports here.
Right, I know,
And so
but
if it's something that we could,
Yeah,
if it's feasible, if it's not.
I tend to take a, that there were several of them this time, so I would have just downloaded them all and, just a little bit of extra work. That's fine. If the rest of the committee is comfortable doing it that way.
No, you gotta keep it longer somewhere.
No, I knew that was coming.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, we'll give it a try, and if it works, great. Yeah, I think it's something that we kind of discussed as well, and I think that's kind of the way that audit committee reporting is going on more of a kind of an exception basis that allows you to just focus on really what's important to the committee and not necessarily have to filter through everything.
Karen?
Well, would that, since I'm not on the board, I mean, on the committee, will that information be sent to all the members of the board?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Nope.
On the report? Okay, great. So, review of information requests, did we have any?
We did not have any.
Okay, great. And now, the draft agenda for the next committee meeting? Any?
Larry, I think
Questions, comments on
the
that?
education item we've got on there, Larry, it's got Brian's name on it. I think that's actually the cybersecurity one that we talked about for the off-site the next month after that. And we've lined up a speaker already, a high-level speaker around cybersecurity for March.
Great.
So I don't think we have that need that on your agenda unless there's something else you were thinking of. It'll make that timing a little more efficient for the committee.
Okay. I didn't have a particular topic at this time. It's something that we can discuss and in between now and then. And based on the discussion today, it might be, something to focus on with regards to, governance, risk, and compliance perhaps, or kind of how this, I think the question came up of how does this all work together and what is the differences, and perhaps we can sort through that a little bit from an educational perspective.
Okay, well, let's talk about that then.
Yeah.
Great.
Sure.
We'll leave that as a placeholder if we want. Okay, anything else?
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Opportunities for statements from the public. I don't know if you were, that was next.
Yeah,
on the list.
sorry, opportunity for statements from the public. I was asking if there was anything else on the agenda, but that's fine. That next item is opportunities for statements from the public. I don't see any, so I think we are adjourned. And thank you very much for,
And then governance committee.
They give a time to the audience for
1:30.
governance?
1:30, 1:30.
1:30, okay, so we'll be back at 1:30 for
1:30?
governance.
So did you guys all hear that? We're gonna come back at 1:30 for the governance.